The second sister. The second sister, she has her ascendant in Scorpio. Now remember that the Scorpio trait is in the bloodline, starting with the patriarch. And we're talking about malignant narcissists in the zodiac and transgenerational abuse. Malignant narcissism and transgenerational abuse. Again, religious folk, we call that generational curses. To me, it doesn't matter. Now, this is their first child together. There was the child that she had, and that relationship didn't work out. And when the child was 4, that's when she brought in and married the alcoholic abuser and addict, incestor. That's when she brought that in. Now, the father has a Scorpio stellium, and their first child together has a Scorpio ascendant, and she has a big old Scorpio stellium in her 12th house. Even though she's a Libra sun, this house, her 12th house, has her Mercury, her Sun, and her Jupiter. And her Sun is at 27 degrees Libra. So she actually has a few stelliums. She has her Pluto, her Mars, her Uranus, her Mercury, and her Sun, all in the sign of Libra. Now she has her Jupiter, her Ascendant, her Venus, and her Neptune in Scorpio. Now she has her first house Scorpio. Okay, Pluto, Mars, Uranus, Mercury, and Sun, all in Libra, but in different houses. Pluto, Mars, and Uranus are all in the same house, her 11th house. Her first house has her Venus in Scorpio in her first house, and her Neptune in Scorpio in her first house. Her moon is in the sign of Cancer, and I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to start with the aspect. She has a Saturn opposition, from her 7th house to her first house. Saturn is opposing her Venus. Saturn is opposing her Neptune. Saturn is also opposing her Jupiter in Scorpio and opposing her ascendant. Now she's got her moon in Cancer, and her Sun is square. Her moon is square her Sun, and her moon is square her Mercury. She has Chiron in her 5th house of children in the sign of Aries, and she has her North Node in the sign of Pisces. Now, when Saturn began its transit through Virgo, it was just hitting the first of her stelliums. 11th house stellium, 12th house stellium, 1st house stellium. 11th house stellium, 12th house stellium, 1st house stellium. I say 1st house stellium because she's got her ascendant in Scorpio, That starts her first house. And then she's got Venus. Venus conjunct Neptune in her first house. And Saturn is opposing both. But back to the Virgo transit. This individual, that was the beginning of the end of life as she knew it, because she was about to have a massive breakdown that would leave her unable to go to school, to work, to drive, to function. And I know what this Saturn opposition to her Venus and to her Neptune represent. It's how she grew up. Saturn being the symbol of what created the limitation in her life, the neglect in her life, the things that she would have needed to be able to stand in the world and create a life for herself. And the fact that she's got Neptune, she's got Venus and Neptune in her first house, it indicates someone who needed to be treated with care, someone who was delicate, someone who was sensitive. That in addition to her Cancer moon. Neptune, Pisces, sensitive. I don't think that Venus is as sensitive as Neptune, Pisces, but it's delicate, and that is in Scorpio, and it's opposed by Saturn. I mean, she wasn't loved the way that she needed to be loved. She was not nurtured the way that she needed to be nurtured. And down the road, it showed up in the form of an individual who represented all the toxic things that she was exposed to in her childhood, all the toxic things that happened to her, all the neglect that led to even more toxic things. She had attracted men who were abusive previous to this final one, but they just kept getting worse. And this final individual was able to create this level of destruction in her life, and her parents pretty much created the soil for the things to develop and to grow from the neglect, the abuse, the trauma, the alcoholism, the drug addiction. Because of, this was the father. He was the addict. And the mother was the enabler and codependent. Back to that Venusian bad side of Venus. I want to be comfortable at any cost. And for her, being married was something that she had to have. That was her comfort. That any man will do mentality, that anything that you do in this house doesn't matter. Anything that you do to the children doesn't matter. Just don't leave me. That is this person's Saturn opposing her Venus and opposing her Neptune. Yeah, the moon square her sun. She didn't understand the things that she needed. This conflict between, what is it that she needs and what is it that she's wanting. Now, this second daughter ended up becoming a family scapegoat because she tried to defend the first scapegoat. And having 3 planets in Libra, you could see in her life that she wanted fairness. She wanted any wrongs to be righted. And she was actually the only one who listened to the first daughter. The rest of the kids, they just went along with the program. You know, the denial, the enabling. They just went along with it, and then they repeated it with their own families. She repeated it with her own family as well, but she was able to tell the other siblings that what happened to the first daughter was real, because she was old enough to remember it. She was old enough to have seen it. And that did her in. She sealed her fate with them as soon as she did that. It's like this this malignant narcissism and the denial that happens in, you know, these alcoholic and addict families. It operates like a zombie virus, you know. It just you could kind of use any horror movie, you know, to you can use either one as an analogy. You know, is it vampirism? Is it the Z-zombie virus? Is it, I mean, what is it? You know, body snatchers, you know. Oh. The bottom line was that, you know, she's one of them, but she's not one of them, because she sees, you know, that Libra energy where she wanted the fairness. I mean, she had kind of a relationship with this older half-sister and tried to defend her, and that infuriated. And she did other things too. She did other things, you know, you know, in the name of fairness, trying to be fair, you know, regarding you know, certain baby mamas in the family and the baby. And then one of the siblings, you know, her brother and the girlfriend at the time became furious with her for trying to introduce this child to its family. But the child was better off not knowing. Anyway, she ended up being beaten. The baby mama ended up being beaten, and then this sister, the second sister, the second daughter. Have I been saying second sister? Wherever I say second sister, I mean second daughter. She ended up getting death threats from her own brother and death threats from the then girlfriend. And the rest of the siblings joined in, laughing at what happened, that this child saw her mother beaten to a pulp. This baby, they had no empathy. They just, the girlfriend beat her to a pulp. And went to the house where, you know, the other sisters were, and they were just laughing their asses off. Somebody called the police, and when the police showed up, they put on an act. "Oh no, officer. Oh, that's so terrible. We don't know anything about it, but oh, that's so awful." And as soon as the cops left, they just started laughing their asses off again. And I don't know, maybe it helped, you know, that the girlfriend, you know, had this Ukrainian accent. But she's from the Ukraine. Maybe it didn't help, I don't know. But there they all were, laughing, celebrating. A group of people from different walks, but what they had in common was that they were addicts, alcoholics, abusers, and malignant narcissists. But this Libra sun with many stelliums paid for being a Libra, paid for trying to do the right thing. And unfortunately, the foundation that she was given in her formative years caught up with her. It's likely that when the parents die, that she will be a ward of the state. She will. What is that? Can an adult be the a ward of the state, or is that only children? But she's completely incapable of taking care of herself. But back to that Saturn transit, to her entire stellium. I mean, the minute Virgo, the minute Saturn hit Virgo, sometimes when these transits happen, sometimes you feel things, in advance. Other people, it just hits them, when the transit happens. It's like, okay, bam, But other people, they feel it, or they get the effect of the transit, because this happened in the early degrees of Virgo, but her 11th house is intercepted with Virgo and Libra, and it really just, that was the point where everything went down. So by the time Virgo made it into Libra, her 11th house stellium, she was finished. And she just progressively got worse. The medications, the psychiatric medications, distorted her body. She went from being slim and attractive to just being bloated and swollen. It's not from food, it's from the psychiatric meds. Anyway, I'm going to move over to her Chiron in her 5th house of children and creativity. In Aries. Chiron being in her 5th house tells the story. We know what Chiron is. Chiron is symbolic of the wound. It's where we are most deeply wounded. I think she's deeply wounded in a lot of places, but one thing that she wanted, once she had this complete and total nervous breakdown, she lost her children, and she wasn't going to get them back. But she doesn't realize that the things that she exposed her children to, like her mother, she didn't realize, the denial, that's where the denial was. And I don't want to put myself at risk by giving too many details here. But her son from a previous relationship, was beaten, by this man that she married. And there are these things that you just know when you're an intuitive. Her daughter is exhibiting all of the behaviors of someone who's been sexually violated. But this child also, what do you want to call it, drinking the Kool-Aid, taking the zombie bite. She's down with the system, the same system that traumatized her. And as for the child that she had with this man that she married, it's just a really, really sad story of a little boy who longs for his father and longs for his father's love, and he's never, ever, ever going to get it. this second daughter made a lot of really, really bad choices and bad decisions. She didn't protect her children because that whole Neptune thing, you know, go back to Neptune being in the first house. I think it's just part of who she is, you know, her, your first house is supposed to be your house of self. You know, it's Aries' house. It's the things that you long for, that you desire, that you aim for. And with Neptune there, it's just a part of who she is, you know, to just be in denial. To be in denial about the things, you know, that should matter to her the most. But yeah, she ended up losing all of her kids. And her wish after all of these things happened, you know, the whole family falling apart, you know, social services, you know, coming in, taking the kids. She just wanted her family to be together. And she suffers for it. Or suffers because of it. And that is Chiron in her 5th house, in Aries. And by the way, the husband is an Aries. Abuser, beater, pedophile. And her father has the Scorpio sun and stellium. Here she is with her Scorpio ascendant and so many planets in Scorpio. The father has a Cancer ascendant. She's got a Cancer moon. Now, what's really tragic, well, what else is really tragic is that she has her North Node in her 4th house. The very place, they always say that the North Node is the place where you're supposed to go to. That's where you're supposed to go. Well, her 4th house is everything that I've been talking about. Her 4th house of malignant narcissist that raised her. So how in the world could that be the place where she's supposed to go? Well, it's called fate. The thing that people don't like to believe in. When I saw this chart, that's the thing, one of the things that convinced me that fate is real. I'd already had so many experiences myself, but it really is real. And here she is, back in the very place that caused her to be sick in the first place. And she has nowhere else to go. And they nurse her and take care of her to the best of their ability. The people who broke her in the first place. North Node in her 4th house. North Node in her 4th house in the sign of Pisces. And that's what happened to the second daughter. And what happened to her family. And how that Scorpion, Cancerian, dark-sided Scorpion, dark-sided Cancerian energy, or can we call it toxic waters? Those toxic waters, that cesspool, those toxic waters, just travel through the generations. Just travel through the generations. And these 2 zodiac signs keep repeating every generation. She's got her Neptune in her 1st house. And she's got her North Node in the sign of Pisces in her 4th house. And one of the expressions of Pisces Neptune is religious delusion. A lot of the problems that resulted for this second sister were caused not just by alcoholism, not just by addiction, but also the religious cult. She absolutely was affected by that part of her upbringing. And her North Node being in Pisces, in her 4th house, that place where she, you know, I call it fate. I call it fate. Could be karma. It could be, you know, some people, you know, believe in the whole cell memory thing where it's just the consequences of choices made, you know, through the generations. You know, and it lands on somebody down the line, or a lot of somebodies. But anyway, yeah, the drug addiction, the alcoholism, you know, the religious cults, that she left the cult and, you know, tried to find her way with evangelicalism and all the promises that they made and all of their hypocrisy, all of those things, and it didn't work out. Yeah. She's got the, not only does she have her moon in Cancer, but she's got Cancer on the cusp of her 9th house, making that moon, you know, her house ruler, and that she would be, you know, very emotional about spiritual things, but at the same time not well. And another look at this, you know, this moon sun square. You know, moon square sun. Moon square sun. You know, it could indicate the conflict between, you know, the two parents. I mean, this woman chose comfort, you know, over the well-being of her children. And so, in addition to, you know, what I said previously or earlier in the video, you know, of her not understanding, you know, how to meet her needs, that additionally, you know, is rooted in this moon square sun, you know, that this conflict, because there always was conflict, you know, fights and screaming and yelling on the way to the Kingdom Hall. Every Sunday, that's just the way it was. See you next video.